Hello friends, Tanya here for the May 2024 10 cards Spellbinders Club Kits. This has been an amazing kit. I know I say that a lot, but I am loving the theme of this month's kit. It is all tropical, and the stitching die of the month is this adorable pineapple. I'm going to show you how to do one of the little round areas on the spiky bit on the pineapple. Well, there's several of them on this piece, and it's all the same stitching. I had cut this piece out from some ink blended or ink smushed cardstock. It was white cardstock, ink smushed with carved pumpkin and spiced marmalade distress oxide inks. This actually was an ink pad that my grandson had re-inked with the wrong color a few years ago, and I discovered that I love that combination. There's also some gold in there. Next, I took a piece of yellow cardstock and spritzed it with some distress mica stain in Harvest Gold, and I'm going to use that to cut out the detail piece that goes over the top of the pineapple for another layer. There's some texturing in this layer also. There are 3 dies that create the base of the pineapple. There's a solid base. There is a drop-in die for the solid base that creates the stitching. And then there's this detailed die. We're going to layer all of these up to create our pineapple base. I'm just adding glue to the edges and over the stitching areas. And then we'll lay that on top of our pineapple base. There are, I think, is it 2 or 3 dies that create the leaves for the pineapple? There's the solid base for the pineapple, and I really love it with layering dies if there's a solid base to do your gluing to, because then you don't have to try and figure out how to keep all of your pieces together. And you can see there's some embossing detail on some areas of the pineapple top, and this helps you figure out which areas do not need a layer because they already look complete as is. Now I'm going to adhere these this base portion to the back of the pineapple, and I just found that this was the best way for me to add this to the top of the pineapple, created some dimension. And these 2 pieces layer together. There's a little embossing line that shows you where they're supposed to overlap. And I chose to layer these on the pineapple in a way different than a lot of people did. I used it as a way to create part of the base of the pineapple crown, so to speak, but I've seen it turned a different direction, and it looks really good that way too. I just didn't see it that way. And that's okay. You can layer your pieces together however you like. I thought this created a nice continuation of the base of the pineapple. I'm just getting that to adhere really nicely. And I did this 6 more times, but I did not use all 6 of them. Next, we're going to move on to the some pink paper. I've got saltwater taffy, worn lipstick, picked raspberry, and I think abandoned coral. Yes. And I took 3 different shades of pink cardstock, and we're going to layer this, ink blend this on in layers. So I start with the saltwater taffy and the worn lipstick on the light pink cardstock. Then I'm going to spritz the area that has the leftover ink on my work surface and spritz my paper and drag it through this. I am using pearlized water to do my spritzing. It adds a little shimmer, and honestly it was the only spray bottle of water I had on my desk, and who doesn't like a little shimmer? Next, we took the worn lipstick and the picked raspberry on the medium tone, and then we're going to use the picked raspberry and abandoned coral on the darkest of the pinks. Do you need to create 3 pink cardstocks with ink blending on them? No, you do not. But I could not make up my mind. Plus, I wanted a whole bunch of flamingo colors to choose from. Once more, doing some ink smushing and spritzing. We're going to pull out the large die of the month, Grand Tropical Flamingos, and we're going to die cut the bodies for these flamingos from all 3 colors. So now I have 2 of each color. So we've got a light, a medium, and a dark. I've die cut their various accompanying pieces, their beaks, their and their legs. That's pretty much it, beaks and legs. And I'm going to adhere the beak to the body, actually to the face. You know, the best way to do this is to add a little bit of black cardstock behind the eye, and then add your black part of the beak. There's a little round area that attaches nicely to the head. Actually, nope, you layer the white onto the black, and then you layer all of this underneath your flamingo's head. Now, when I'm showing you this, I hadn't quite figured out the best sequence yet. So I was putting together the beak and then realized, I got to try to I got to put something behind the eye to create the black, and it's overlapping the eye. So if you have your black cardstock on the back of the head before you adhere your beak, you're going to avoid some struggle there. Next, for this figuring out version, I took a little scrap of black cardstock, tacked it behind the eye, and trimmed off any excess. And I just did that on both versions of our flamingo. We've got one with a slightly relaxed neck and one with a more extended neck, and I think they're just adorable. I'm showing you on this particular piece, when I die cut it, there was a little bit of lacking in the lower portion of the body, but if I hadn't pointed it out, you probably wouldn't have noticed. I do end up using that piece, FYI. So I have 7 flamingos here. These little teardrop shapes are actually to create their legs. So you have that tapering piece that goes down into their legs. You could make your legs whatever color you wanted. Now, I did end up figuring out that this black, or the bent leg, should actually attach to the same teardrop piece as the other leg. And for the 2 straight legs, they each get a teardrop shape. There's a lot of ways to do this. Now, had I been thinking, I would have made one of these legs shorter by adhering the teardrop shape a little lower on the leg, but I do end up getting these lined up pretty well. It takes me a little fiddling, and you can actually adjust this however you want. And you can actually make either one of these have the bent leg. It works for either of them. Now I have both of my cute little flamingos complete, and then I decided to ruffle their feathers a little bit and create a little shaping in their bodies just by pushing up from underneath to create that little bit of body in their shape. Ultimately, these flamingo are pretty easy to put together. Now we're going to move on to the leaves in the large die of the month. We've got several leaves that don't require any layering. There's 2 monstera and like a palm leaf. And then we have this larger flat leaf. I'm going to do a little ink blending with forest moss and mowed lawn here. I think it's more mowed lawn. Or is it, oh gosh, I'm not sure. Anyway, I ink blended the larger piece that's going to be in the background, so it would be the shadowed piece. You could cut this from 2 different colored of cardstock, but I thought it was easier just to ink blend this with a little bit of darker ink. Honestly, when I cut out these green leaves, I just reached into my rainbow of scraps and pulled out a bunch of green and started cutting. We're going to do the layering flower on the large die of the month here. It is so pretty. It's got this, a couple of leaves. Actually, it has 3 petals that have the little curls on them. And we're just going to add those before we assemble the flower. And they're pretty easy to figure out. It is the 3 lower leaves, petals. I'm going to say the wrong thing over and over again, aren't I? And then you can see that the center is the same shape on each of these petals. You're just going to line up the edges. And I actually found that I liked to take the center top petal and start there and layer one on top of that on the left of the petal and one on the right below it. And then I'm going to take one of the lower petals, because this looks like, when it does seem to have a direction, it does seem to have a right way for it to lay, and then add the final piece. And that is the piece with the biggest curled up petal. And there we have our base of petals. And then there are two pieces for the center, and these all die cut on the same die. And in retrospect, I should have cut it from black for the larger piece and then the color for the other, so black would show through the center. Next, we're going to use the small die of the month, Tropical Friends, and it is so cute. It's got two birds in it and some foliage and a flower and a branch. I've die cut all of the pieces here, and you can do the beak of the toucan in stripes or in one solid piece here. There are two different ways to apply that. We have the white face here that we're going to apply first, but first I'm going to add a little bit of pink cardstock behind the cheek die cut fallout area. Just going to add a little glue on the back and take this tiny snippet of light pink cardstock, and then we'll adhere this to the black toucan base. Now there's a little angled portion on the bottom of this piece that we're going to line up the white face with that angle, and that's going to get things exactly where you want it. And there's also some debossing on the black cardstock base. Next, we're going to take this itty bitty teeny tiny eye that I've die cut from some green cardstock, and we're going to adhere that in the center of this eye. So far, so good. Now you could take the solid piece for the beak and add that now, but I'm going to show you the stripes. Now, originally, the first practice one I did, I butted that right up to the edge of the white, but I think it has some overlap. It fit better if I added these stripes overlapping just a little bit on the white face piece. Now, I did use the edges of the black base to help me figure out exactly where the stripes belonged, and I just went along and added them until I reached the end of the beak. I did cut the stripes from 4 different colors, and I did make 2 of these toucans, and I would be able to make 4 toucans from what I die cut because of the 4 different colors. There's also a die that cuts this little smile line, which is just adorable, I think. And then we have a piece for the wing, and he actually comes together pretty darn quickly. I do have little tiny feet to attach. You can easily tell which feet are for which bird. There's a toucan and a parrot in this die set. I'm using the tip of my tweezers to pick up some extra glue, adding 2 tiny little dots of glue, which I do remove some of the excess with the tip of my finger, and then add those to the bottom of our cute little toucan. There he is. And then we're going to move on to the parrot. I die cut the base from red on this one. I was going for a scarlet macaw. It's like a rainbow of colors. They are such vibrant colors. You would think that it wasn't real, but man, they are vibrant red, vibrant yellow, vibrant blue, and vibrant green. Stunning birds. Parrots live for a really long time. So if you get a parrot, you better figure out who's going to take that parrot when you die, because they live as long as humans do. It's amazing. I add the white face on the parrot here, and we're going to add a black eye for this one. My fine tip reverse tweezers are my best friend when it comes to these tiny pieces, and my pickup stick helps to get them seated where they need to be, because let's be honest, my fingers get so gluey when we're doing these things. I use my fingers to pick up the extra glue so they don't dry, so it doesn't dry on our finished product. And yeah, it's just good to have have tools. And my pickup stick has a wax tip on one end and a pointy tool on the other. If you had a crystal katana, they do the same. That's what's available in the Spellbinders site. There's lots of places to pick up these kind of pickup tools. I'm adding yellow, green, and blue to the tail of this parrot on a red base. That base could be any color. It really wouldn't matter, but that happened to be the color I was cutting the body out of, and it just made it easier to do that. So I'm going to add this tail now to the assembled tail to the body of our cute little parrot. And then there is a wing here, and there are 3 pieces that are the layering pieces, and there's a base piece. No, there's just the layering pieces. So one die cuts 3 different sizes for the different layers of the wings. And so I did indeed cut this from 3 different colors. So I have the pieces to make 3 different wings. I did make 2 different parrots because why not? I did not use all of the elements that I created in my prep work for this 10 cards video. So I have lots of pre-prepared pieces to continue making more than 10 cards. There was so much to play with. I was almost a little overwhelmed with this kit because I wanted to play with everything at once. If you have not subscribed to the Deluxe Caboodle, this would be an excellent month to do that. There are so many beautiful elements that work so well together, and there are 2 bonus products for the month of May. There's a stencil and a press plate set. There are our 2 birds. Now let's move on to the other elements of the small die of the month. We have this beautiful heart plant. Now this could be a bleeding heart plant, or it could be anthurium, which has heart-shaped leaves and flowers. It's also called the flamingo flower. I bet you didn't know you were going to get a little bit of botany with each of your videos lately, but that's how we are. So I like to tuck the heart into the stem there. So we've got some over and some under. And then we have a 5-petal flower that could be any flower. And it also die cuts the center. The center and the flower, 5-petal flower, cut on the same die. And I chose to cut a bunch of black centers for those. We've got some monstera leaves and some like palm leaves or some other very leafy branch, and then a branch. You could layer these together for a branch for your little bird to sit on. That's an example of how this could fit together. So many fun ways to add that. Next, we have the Glimmer of the month. This is Tropical Bloom. There's this large lotus, or what we call them is water lilies where I live. It could be all kinds of beautiful flowers, but that's how it looks to me. It looks like a lotus or a water lily to me. I'm going to foil this in fuchsia flower. That's what this color is, and in aura. And I did that twice, the fuchsia flower. And I'm going to show you how I colored it with Copic markers or alcohol markers. I've got a purple or a blue violet and a red violet, I should say, a peachy red, and then a really pale pink yellow color. And I'm going to blend each of these petals individually. So I start with our darkest color at the base, move in with our mid-tone and blend that back to the base, and then add our lightest tone and just blend that a little bit into the mid-tone. And then I come back and add the darkest tone. I could have chosen a darker base tone and then not had to come back and blend again. But in the Copic line, there is really a lacking in the purple department. I don't think they're ever going to add any more colors. I think there are as many colors as they're going to create, but there are lots of alcohol markers on the market now. So, and some of them have a better range of purples. So check it out if that's what you want to do. I'm going to go through and color all of those petals, and I'll do that off screen. I'm going to show you how I colored the stem. I have the darker of the two greens that I'm going to use, and then I come back with the lighter and do that on the middle portion of the stem, kind of as a highlight. Next, there is the add-on die set. Well, I shouldn't say add-on. This is one of the bonus ones. This is the Tropical Bloom Stencil. This is one of the bonuses if you get the deluxe caboodle. So you're going to have this coordinating stencil for this beautiful flower. So I decided to kind of go another direction. The other one was purples to pinks and yellows, and this one is going to be orange or red tones to yellows. So I have 3 colors picked out here, but I honestly only use 2. I use Poppy and Buttercup, I believe. These are Concord and Ninth inks, and they blend just beautifully. They're beautiful dye inks, and I'm using some blender brushes here. Spellbinders carries 2 or 3 sizes, and I think they do some of this tiny little detail brushes now too. I haven't really gotten into those yet, but I'd like to try them. Let me know if you have tried the detail brushes yet. We're going to do the second layer, because there's 2 layers in this stencil. That way you can get a little variation in your petals if you want some darker than others, and it's just easier sometimes to do 2 layers here. And that, as you can see, I covered up the leaf portion of the stencil, or not leaf, the stem portion of the stencil with some washi to make sure I didn't get ink where I didn't want it. I will over ink my stencils, so you will see that I cover my edges often. Otherwise, I would have images I couldn't use. There's my 3 versions. I did ink blend in a purple version also. Next, we have the wax seal of the month. It's this beautiful leafy high. We're going to use some, is that matcha? I think those are matcha beads, and we're going to use the gold ones out of one of the mixes. So I'm going to do my 2 different waxes. This is like my standard. I love how this turns out. I have 2 chimneys because it just works out better for me. I have a metal palette knife, and I've put my wax seal on the chimney to heat up along with the wax. Now that my wax seal is warm and my wax is melted, I pour that onto the wax seal, and then I use my warm palette knife. This is why you need a metal one, so you can heat it up. And I did find that if I rested the handle on the glass, this is just a candle stand, a large candle stand that I've had for probably decades, and I set that on the second chimney, then it heats that up. Now that I've gotten the extra wax scraped off of our wax seal and our green wax is melted, I'll set that in our green wax puddle that I tried to make kind of an oval. I thought this was ready to come off the wax seal, but I had to give it a little more time. And if you're patient, look at that. That is just gorgeous. I love how the wax just stands out so beautifully. Next, we're going to use the stencil of the month, and we're actually going to start our first card. I have 2 different metallic pigment inks here. We've got the Delicata ink in Golden Glitz and the Encore Gold ink. Now, I don't know if Encore Gold ink is available anymore. I know the Delicata is, and it's hard to find sometimes. And there are a number of places that actually sell gold pigment inks if you don't have these in your stash already. But if you do have gold pigment inks in your stash, I encourage you to go use them. Dig through your stash, find new ways to use your products. And if you're anything like me, you go in and out of trends or moods with the supplies that you're using, and I've definitely been in a mood to use my metallic pigment inks. I'm using my Altenew sticky mat here for the inside of that's for the Altenew stamp wheel. I have an extra, and I use that for my stencils. It holds the paper in place so you know it's not going to slip around. And if your stencils and your paper are sized correctly, if you have some overlap for the stencil to adhere to the sticky mat, that is the best. I did use a little bit of masking tape here so I wouldn't get, of course, ink on the parts of the cardstock that I didn't want. That helps a lot. And this is actually a repeating design, which I did discover. So we're going to make a full 8.5 by 5.5 inch piece of cardstock that is stenciled with this stencil. Here I am matching up the parts of the pattern that match, just carefully finding those overlapping drops or arches or shapes. Now, my masking tape doesn't really want to stick to the cardstock that has the pigment ink on it. That's not a surprise. It's not completely dry, so I'm having to reinforce it with my fingers a little bit. Now, if I'd remembered, I could have taken a piece of acetate from some packaging and laid that over to protect the area that's already been stenciled. And I had been only using one ink blender for both of these colors, yet don't do as I do. I did ultimately have to go get a second ink blending foam for the different colors, or I would just have one color of stenciling, as you're going to see here in just a second. Now that I have that second stencil realigned, I'm going to add the golden glitz, although it looks remarkably like the Encore Gold when I lift this up, because that ink blending foam was mostly the darker color and it just overpowers. So I ended up flipping over this cardstock and doing it over on the back with two different daubers for each of the colors. We're going to take the Lattice Work embossing folder of the month and a piece of white cardstock. This, I don't remember what size this was. I used a 5x7 matting die set to cut that out because we're making a 5x7 card. For our tropical bloom, I used my scan and cut to cut this out and an extra layer at the same time, so that, or not the same time, but I removed the piece that I cut first, put a fresh piece of cardstock, and just had it cut another exact size, the exact same shape. We've got our 5x7 card base, which is 10x7 scored at 5. And I've added some extra cardstock to our stenciled piece that's going to be our mat. And this is cut to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. And we'll add our lattice work piece, sort of centered. Yeah, it is centered. Again, using a 5x7 matting dies from Spellbinders. We're going to adhere our beautiful tropical bloom. This is going to be the backdrop for our flamingo. I think most of my cards this time are over the top cards, but I had so many beautiful things to play with. So we're going to add some glue behind our flamingo. I did avoid putting glue over the part of the fluffed feathers, and we'll just adhere that to our flower. I didn't add any extra cardstock behind these pieces. And then these are flowers from the large die of the month. The Grand Tropical Flamingos, is that the name of it? It is a beautiful die set. Oh my gosh. I can't even tell you which is my favorite of this release. There are so many gorgeous components in this club grouping this month. I'm going to add a cluster of white flowers here at the base of our flamingo, and this was the flamingo that I didn't cut completely correctly, so I'm covering that up. We're also going to use some rhinestones from Trinity Stamps. These are the Crystal Sunset, I believe. So they've got all these beautiful warm tones, and we'll add those to the centers of the flowers. Now that I have all of those applied, it's time to start working on the inside of this card. Well, I guess I don't have all of them applied. I'm just using my Barely Art Precision Glue and my fine tip bottle. Next, we're going to use the sentiments from the Tropical Bloom Glimmer of the Month. I have some, I'm not sure what color this is. I think it might be Fruit Punch. No, I think I'm using the ink blended scraps from earlier. I'm taping these down with some Aura foil, and we'll run that through our Glimmer machine. That might be Fruit Punch. It is indeed fruit punch cardstock from Spellbinders. This is 100-pound cardstock, and it usually foils very well. I think I should have chosen another color of foil because it's a little difficult to read. We are also going to foil some tropical sentiments. This is another of the bonus products from the Kit and Caboodle. It has 4 sentiments that are very tropical themed, and I'm going to foil one of those on our same piece of fruit punch cardstock. There are coordinating dies for all of these sentiments in this press set, and you can foil or press plate with all of these. That's one of my favorite features with the press plates, is that you can foil or press plate with them. It's amazing. I decided to not use that sentiment. We're going to use the wax seal, which I did in peachy pink and gold, and we're going to adhere that right by our flamingo. So cute. I love that. Now this card would work for just about anything. I have a scrap of that cardstock that I stenciled, and we're going to add that to the inside of the card, just in the lower portion of the card. And then I take the sentiment from the Tropical Sentiments press plate set, and I'm adhering that over our stenciled piece, and I have a flower. And man, I'm getting bolder and bolder with what I put on the inside. I'm taking a peach opalescent sequin, and this is a cupped sequin, but it's actually pretty flat. So I find a medium size sequin, and I add that to the center of the flower, and I'm telling you, it has no problems closing. So yeah, I'm putting sequins on the insides of my cards. Next, we're going to use the 5x7 matting basics and the Scattered Tropics 3D embossing folder of the month with a light pink cardstock. I also have 3 colors of Distress Oxide inks here. We have Twisted Citron, Mowed Lawn, and oh golly, what is the last color? Something Forest, I think. Oh, God. It's one of the newest greens, and I'm adding those in different layers. We've got the Golden Hour Solar Paste, which is so fun to use. It adds just that light gold shimmer to things. And I did ultimately go back and add this to all of the leaves. I'm also going to try to use a little bit of the Slippery When Wet over the flowers. I wanted some contrast between the flowers and the leaves here. And I tried the traffic cone also. Now I got a little extra with this because this I had a little too much paste on my finger. So this is the lunar paste. The Golden Hour is the solar paste, which is more of a light color. They're more pastel or more tinted white colors, and the lunar paste is a solid color. I did ultimately go back and add gold back to the tops of all of the flowers, and I haven't gone back and added the Golden Hour to all of the leaves yet. We're going to pull out the mirrored arch labels, and I do die cut this from vellum and white cardstock. We're going to use the large die of the month Grand Tropical Flamingos again for the foliage, because I want some of that big foliage and some of these cute little flowers. We have the Tropical Friends die set, and we're using the parrot and some of the smaller foliage, and we're going to group those on our mirrored arch here. Now that I have all of my pieces assembled, I'm going to add a little dots of glue behind this palm frond. And I love how it just follows the curve of the mirrored arch die cut here. We've got one of the Monstera leaves, one of the big Monstera leaves. And there are 3 different Monstera leaf dies in this month's club kits and 2 palm leaves. So we're going to use both of these on this card. Just layering all these different leaves up. I love that there's so much foliage in this clubs collections. Final little monstera leaf. And then we'll add our parrot. Oh, nope. Another monstera leaf and another green. And then I'm just trying to figure out exactly where I want to put our cute little parrot. I want to tuck him kind of in between the leaves. And I do believe I put a little extra cardstock behind the parrot to help him stand up a little bit. There he is in amongst all of the foliage. And then we're going to add our flowers, and I think I decided to go with 3 flowers on this one. Just going to cover that last little corner of the mirrored arch die cut here, adding a little bit of glue just to the center of each flower and adhering those down. Normally I take my main element and assemble it on the card front, but I didn't do that this time. I'm not sure why. We're going to take our beautiful embossed and gilded panel that I've added some extra cardstock to and adhere that to our 5x7 card base. This was cut down to 4.5 by 6.5 and adhered to the front of that. And then I decided I needed a little more separation from that beautiful busy background. So I cut a slightly, the next size up of the mirrored arch dies, and I cut it from some vellum and we'll adhere those 2 pieces together. There's a little bit of extra cardstock behind our main panel, and we're going between the vellum and the main panel, and we're going to use another piece of cardstock behind the vellum layer, and then we'll adhere that to the front of our card. Just adding some of that Barely Art Precision glue. I haven't added centers to our flowers yet. I wanted to do that after it was well adhered to the front of the card. While that's drying, we're going to take out the tropical sentiments again, and we're going to find the sentiment that says, apparently it's your birthday. And I have another piece of pink cardstock that's left over from our ink blending of the flamingos. I'm using the black BetterPress ink, and I've figured out exactly where I want this on the base before I put the before I flip it over. Just removing any extra ink that might be on the base there, and there it is. I just love how bold it is when you do the BetterPress. It is so stunning. We'll run this through because it fits in our little machine here. I don't know if you saw, but Spellbinders is coming out with a small die cutting machine that has a 3.5-inch wide opening, and it has the same platforms. So they, I assume, are going to start coming out with some embossing folders that will work in that little one. I'm so excited. I love a nice tabletop, like small die cutting machine, because I don't know about you, but my craft room has a lot of stuff in it. It does. And there's a limited flat space. So it's nice to not have to have a dedicated spot for a die cutting machine. And this makes it easy to have it right on your workspace. I've added that sentiment to the front of the card, and now we're going to add some more of those peach opalescent sequins to the centers of our flowers. Just add a little dab of glue in the center of each flower and add our, I think I used the largest sequin on the centers of these flowers. On the camera, it's looking kind of red when I'm adhering these sequins, but they are definitely the peach opalescent. They have a lot of different color reflections in these. They're very much a chameleon sequin. And I'm adding a scattering of these around our cute little parrot. There is card number 2. Oh, wait, for the inside, I go way back and I find the Sweet and Snarky birthday wishes. I wanted this big, beautiful birthday, which I've foiled in green foil on some, I think this is brushed rose gold from Tonic. I have quite the stash of specialty cardstock, mirror cardstock, and I really need to use it. So I pulled that out and it foils gorgeously, just like all of the glossy cardstocks. Check out your stash. See what you have that you could potentially use with your foiling to get these amazing results. I'm going to tuck some leaves behind this beautiful birthday sentiment. That particular Glimmer of the Month was from June of 2021, so it's a few years old. If you've been doing the Glimmer of the Month for long, you might have it in your stash. Don't forget to use your stash. I mean, that's why we have these clubs, so we can build our stashes and have all kinds of fun, different things to choose from. I've got 3 leaves here, and I'm going to add, I think it's just 1 flower. Yep, we're going to add that in the crook here by the H and the B. And I am going to add another sequin. And it really does close beautifully. You can add some layers to the inside of your card. Shocking. I'm still amazed that we can do that. On to card number 3. We're going to use the 5x7 matting layers again and the lattice work embossing folder of the month. And this is cut down to, I think it's 4.5 by 6.5 inches. Now that I've cut and embossed this, we're going to use tea dye and antique linen distress ink cubes here to apply some ink color to the raised portions. And I'm doing just the smallest amount of the tea dye. The tea dye is a lot darker than the antique linen, and I love the wicker look that creates. We're going to use one of the stitched pineapples that I've already die cut and assembled, and some flowers, greenery from the Grand Tropical Flamingos large die of the month. And we're also going to use sentiments from the Tropical Bloom Glimmer of the month. Whole lot going on here. I have extra cardstock layered behind our wicker look or the lattice work panel that we're going to add to another 5x7 card base. Just centering that nicely on the card front. This is, of course, my favorite card size. Then we're going to take our pineapple and we're going to group it up with these florals and foliage. I'm going to adhere the pineapple first with a little bit of extra cardstock behind it, and there is some space that isn't adhered to the cardstock. We're also going to use one of the white foam adhesive strips. Now this comes in strips, so you can use it in a variety of ways. I have been cutting it apart to add behind elements that are going to need to layer over some pretty high stacked things. And that pineapple is at least 3-4 layers of cardstock thick. Now I've adhered the flower down right at the right base of the pineapple. We're going to take this, is this like a banana leaf plant? I had to pause the recording here and go look it up. It is indeed a banana leaf. I can't believe I know the names of so many different tropical plants. Just one of those things I've absorbed through life. I imagine most of us have, but it is fun to go down those rabbit holes. And this is a fern. It could be any of many different kinds of ferns. We're going to glue this large darker green monstera leaf next to this beautiful flower. I love that flower. I had die cut the flower from some ink blended cardstock that I pulled from my rainbow of paper scraps. And I think it was done with some Hero Hues reactive inks like taffy and creamsicle, and maybe some wild berry, but I'm not positive. I did die cut some blue flowers from some of the same stash. I think I'd created those in the same crafting session, and these were the leftovers. Again, I saved those scraps because you might just be saving yourself some time later on in another crafting session when you need some ink blended stuff. I have my 2-bit, so when I create a bunch of stuff and I need a place to hold all of the larger pieces, I have these cherry tomato crates. This is what the containers they come in, and you just peel the plastic off the top. Well, I have a stack of those, and that's what I have my pieces sorted out in here, and they stack together nicely. So I went back to my bin of large greenery and found another darker monstera leaf, one of the big ones, and added that behind our flower to help balance this arrangement a little more. And I have a bunch of little white flowers that I've added just by adding a little glue to the center. And I cupped them in my hand a bit. These are some sentiments that I foiled in rainbow foil from the Glimmer of the Month, the Tropical Bloom, and die cut those. I have some extra scraps of cardstock that I've also die cut to back the sentiments if I wanted them on the front of the card. So I'm adding 2 extra layers behind this, sending best wishes. And then we'll add some glue to that and stick it to the front of our card, kind of overlapping the pineapple and the flower. I like how one of the petals of the flower is overlapping over the sentiment a little more, and it's almost like it's giving it a little hug. We're going to add some sequins to our card here. I did consider the peach and the pink opalescent, and then I found these hot pink sequins from the Advent calendar this year. And you're going to see some other sequins from that kit later on in this video. And I am just going to add those to the centers of our flowers. I do end up using some of the peach opalescent also. I'm using the medium-sized sequins on the centers of these flowers, although I will say that this hot pink mix only has 2 sizes. It has a small and a large, which are about equal to the medium and the large sizes in the sequin mixes from the Color Essentials line. Here we've got the peach opalescent cluster at the top of the pineapple, and then I do add a scattering throughout the flowers and the leaves here. I am still loving this fine tip glue bottle here from Spellbinders. It comes in a set of 2 for $5.99. They have a soft side, so if you have troubles with arthritis in your hands and you still want to use this fine tip version, oh my gosh, they're wonderful. We're also going to take the Curved Everyday Sentiments, which came out last month, I believe, with the Glimmering Florals. And these are just so fun. There's 14 different sentiments, and there were 3 different sentiments that I could have used just for this one card. There's a lot of awesome, slightly summer-ish sentiments in this, just because I think of sweet stuff with the summer, with the sweet smell of flowers and ice cream treats and popsicles and that kind of thing. But it really could go for any time of the year. I'm adding some orange and yellow blended flowers to the inside of this card, using the same colors that are on the front of the card. And we'll add some sequins again to the inside of our card. Now that I've discovered that you can add sequins to the inside of your cards, oh my gosh, that's totally going to happen more. Look at that. So cute. Now we're going to move into some prep work for the next couple of cards. We're going to use the BetterPress of the Month, Wild and Free. It's this large plate that does a background and a sentiment. We're going to use some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink just because that's just the one I chose. Honestly, it's a bigger ink pad than the small jet black BetterPress ink, and I have a 5x7 piece of watercolor paper here, and that just is stunning. I am going to watercolor this panel, and I'm using my Daniel Smith watercolors here. And if you love a sparkly gray with undertones of purple and pink and blue, this is the watercolor for you. It's called Moon Glow. Again, Daniel Smith watercolor. Just stunning. I love that gray. I use it all the time, and it's one that I'm ultimately going to end up buying a tube of because eventually I'll use up my little half pans. I think I probably have this in more than one palette, but I will eventually use up all of the little half pans that I have of this color, and I will want more. I don't use every color of my watercolor or my Daniel Smith's enough to want an entire tube of, but this is definitely one of them. And you can get quite a variation in the depth of color here. You're going to see that I use one color, one gray color, to paint all of these cockatiels here. When I was doing a little research on the cockatiels, they can be, there's actually a lot of variety. In grays, pretty much, they're gray and kind of white with these peachy coral cheeks with a yellow top knot, so to speak. There are 2 cockatiels in this background, and I am coloring them pretty much at the same time. And now it's time to add the yellow portions of their feathers, and it's just the top of their heads, and sometimes I add a little bit of yellow into the crown of their head also. And I used whatever yellow was in my palette. There are 2 or 3 different yellows in this particular palette, and one of them has a lot of white in it, and so it's less transparent and more opaque, which you'll see a little later what I mean. And then I'm just taking various greens and painting the foliage. You could make these all kinds of different greens to match whatever your palette is going to be, but I just decided to go from one green on down the line. I think there's 5 or 6 greens in this palette. And I just start on one end and start moving across, doing different greens for my foliage, not being too particular about it. I do know that Monstera leaves are more of an emerald green in the deep end of emerald green. So I try to keep those with a little more of a crisp, clear green versus an olive or a blue green. Just adding the paint carefully here, because Monstera leaves have these big, beautiful fenestrations or holes in them. And I have been learning lately that the older the plant and the healthier it is, the more fenestrations it has. And it will need some good sunlight to maintain that health and the growth, which is really gorgeous. I've always liked Monstera plants, but I have never had as a desire to try to keep them in my home, because in northern Minnesota, my house is probably not warm enough for that kind of a large tropical plant, because we keep it mid 60s to high 60s if we're lucky, because my ground floor is a walkout basement, so we're always battling that ground temp, which is pretty consistently 54 degrees, which helps to moderate things a little bit. But even in the summer, it doesn't get hot in my downstairs. It has to be 90 plus degrees for 3 days straight for there to be any change in the temperature in my walkout basement main floor. My craft space is actually on the 2nd level, which we do have a lot more heat fluctuation there. If it's really cold out, it's really cold out up there. Well, not since we got our heat pump. What do you call it? Mini split. It is a wonderful heating. We're turning this into an advertisement for heating. It heats and cools, and it's really, really efficient, and I really love it. So now I'm not sweating to death in the summer when it gets hot in my fishbowl great room, or too cold in the wintertime where I'm actually almost feeling like I need mittens and boots. Yes, we need to do some better insulating. Now that I've yammered all the way through this watercoloring, there is the entire panel. Just gorgeous. Then I took that same plate and foiled a bunch of things. It took me about 20 minutes to watercolor that, and it took maybe that same amount of time, if not less, to foil on all of these pieces of cardstock total. So lots of ways to use this plate, and there's a bunch of the sentiments foiled on different papers. We have this gorgeous rainbow foiling on black cardstock. I'm making a shaped card with the mirrored arch labels. We'll take the largest of these, it is basically an A2 size card, ultimately about 5.5 by 4.25 inches. I took a full sheet of 100-pound white cardstock, scored it at 5.5 inches, and then we have this 5.5 by 8.5 piece of folded cardstock. Ran that through the die cutting machine with the one edge of the mirrored arch die overhanging the fold edge. Then I die cut that beautiful foiled piece with the same die and adhered that to the front of the card. This is going to be a very simple card. The foiling, the die cutting, and that's about it. We're just layering this on. We'll take this sentiment that says "Be wild and free on your birthday," which that is so cool. Now, there is going to be a nesting die set that will coordinate with the opening on the plate here, but I think it comes out next month. I'm going to have to buy that myself. For the inside of the card, I wanted to bring the background in from the front of the card to the inside. So I'm taking my Encore ink and some plain white cardstock and running that through the BetterPress plate system on a piece of, that's probably a 5x7 piece of cardstock. And we're using the birthday messages stamp set to add a message to the inside of the card, framed beautifully by this BetterPress plate. We'll center that. I have this piece of cardstock in my Misty using some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And I'll just give that a good gentle press and a little time to absorb, and we have a beautiful sentiment. It says, "Sending warmest wishes for your happiness today and always," which would work for birthday and for lots of other things. I really like how that played together. Then I took another of the mirrored arch dies and took the one just smaller than the one we used to cut the card front and the card base, and centered that in our card, add my heavyweight block to make sure that adheres well, and there we have our fourth card. For card number 5, we're making another 5x7 card. We're going to take this die and frame it out, and it comes out to about 4.5 inches wide. And we're going to do some partial die cutting. So I'll cut it the one end, and then I'll move it up and cut the bottom portion so that we have the same nice die cut edging. And this ends up being about 4.5 by 5.75. We're going to take our 5x7 card base, and I am trying to figure out how I want to make this work out. I thought maybe we'd do some leaves above and below, but these leaves are just a little too big for that. We're taking these leaves from the Grand Tropical Flamingos, the large die of the month. And as you can see, I have a whole bin full of them. Going to make full use of them. We're also using the 3D embossing folder, Scattered Tropicals, I think it's called. I die cut that to be 4.75 by 6.75 from white cardstock. And I'm using some pearl luster gilding polish to add a little extra shimmer to the raised portions. And we'll add some extra cardstock to the back of that to make that a good layering mat. And that's just going to have little bits showing through. Next, I'm taking a piece of cardstock and I'm painting on the same colors that we used to do the plumeria flowers on that BetterPress background. That really opaque yellow and a scarlet red and a little deeper red here, or a vermilion and a scarlet. There we go. One of these days I will sit down and write down the watercolors that I'm actually using. That palette, that pink palette there, I will include that in the description box, or no, in the product list, in the clickable product list. I always have a partial list completely in the description box where you can click on it. And then I also include a link that goes to the complete list of products that I use. And those are all clickable links also when you click on that link. There's just too many to fit in the description box. We're going to, after I BetterPressed the sentiment into this watercolor paper that I've watercolored and ink smooshed and just made look like it fits with the rest of the project. I die cut it with the Essential Floral Reflections. I found a layer that would fit perfectly, and I'm adding a little extra cardstock to the back of that. No, I lie. I have 2 extra pieces of card. Well, I do have extra layers of cardstock. I just die cut them with the same die and layered them behind it. And that's always another option. You can take the same die and die cut it more than once with some scrap cardstock. Now it's time to start assembling this card. We'll add some glue to the backs of the extra pieces of cardstock. Center that up on our 5x7 card base. I'm using my Misty here to add a little extra weight to make sure that that lays nice and flat when it's all done. We have the BetterPressed and watercolored panel, and we're going to center that along the bottom. As you can see, I have my edges all even along the 2 sides and the bottom edge. And then we're going to take our foliage from the large die of the month and add those to the top just to even that out. I like everything nicely balanced and even. You know me, I got to center the things. For the most part, I got to center the things. Just feels more balanced that way. More pleasing to the eye. I tear off the stem of that banana leaf because it just wouldn't fit in here nicely otherwise. And just those 3 large leaves from the large die of the month will balance that out just perfectly. Now it's time to add our sentiment to the front of the card, adding some glue to the back of that. And there's a top and a bottom point in the design of the press plate, and the points of the floral reflection fit in there perfectly. Now we're going to take this stamped, and I think this watercolored or Copic colored? This one's watercolored, so it's on watercolor paper. This is from the Clear Stampin' Die of the Month, and there's a coordinating die for this cute little parakeet or small parrot, this tropical bird sitting in the foliage. It's an edge die, so I did use one of the precision layering dies because the cutting line is exactly on the inside of that die. So you can line that up exactly where you want it, where you can have a nice square corner. And then I used the border die from that Clear Stampin' Die set. Next, we're going to take some of those little flowers from the large die of the month. Man, these are versatile. I've used those on practically every card today. Yeah, just about every card. We're going to add those to the front of the card. Again, I did cup these in my hand a little bit beforehand. Just adding glue to the center of each of them, and we're going to use the Peach Opalescent sequins again. Now, I did find an empty container to put these in because the Ziploc portion of my bag had given out. It had peeled apart, so it never closed completely, and I didn't want to lose any of these beautiful sequins. I want to continue using them. Now, the little metal triangle trays, I bought those on Amazon a long time ago, and you can get a set of 10 or 12 of those for very inexpensive, and they never get staticky, the metal ones. I love that about these. And they're very easy to pour into another container. Here we're using some of the yellow and orange ink blended flowers again from the same die that we use for the front of the card. And we're adding more sequins to the inside of the card. Told you I wasn't done doing that. I really like, I can't even tell you if I have a favorite card in this grouping. This one is just so pretty though. I really love it. And we're going to play with the Let's Get Together Clear Stampin' Die again. Here we're doing some prep work. I actually stamped, I think, 5 of these flamingos, and I can't even tell you how many of the small bird. And I did watercolor on half and Copic coloring or alcohol marker coloring on the other half. Here I've stamped the flamingo portion on some watercolor paper with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And I'm going to use some clear embossing powder just to seal that in. That's my favorite way to do watercoloring. You can try to do this with the BetterPress, but I think it works better with a stamp. And man, is this a gorgeous stamp. There are so many different kinds of flowers and foliage in these groupings. I had so much fun coloring these, whether it was watercolors or alcohol markers. And again, I did some in both, and I have extras. Although I will say I lost one of my alcohol ink marker colored flamingo groupings, and it's driving me bananas because I cannot find it. And it turned out so good. I really want to use it. Hopefully it'll turn up eventually. It was, I did my coloring, brought it downstairs for some reason, and then went back upstairs. And when I went back upstairs, I lost a piece. If you're anything like me, that happens on the reg. Here we're also doing the small bird grouping. Again, I did stamp that in VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink on some watercolor paper, and this is just a 2-inch wide scrap. I do recommend using one that's at least 4 inches long so you get all of your coloring. And I was able to stamp this twice on a piece of cardstock here, and I used some intense black Hero Arts ink for that because it's alcohol friendly. I'm going to show you how I painted the flamingo version here. And I did tighten this up, and I apologize if it's not in screen when I'm painting. This first piece that we're painting here is Bird of Paradise, and it does have lots of colors incorporated in it. And I'm not sure on this watercolored piece that I used all of the colors that I would have wanted. Normally you can add, well, when you see these, they have some purple and yellow and blue incorporated in that green base of the Bird of Paradise. You can see a full rainbow in those fronds or the crowns or the flowers of that plant. It's quite stunning, and it's very exotic looking. And then we're going to move on to some of the foliage. I chose to make this one of the darkest of the leaves, and I'm just, as you can see, my palette is just full of different variations of greens, and I'm mixing them as I go to get tones that I like. That's one of the most fun parts of watercolor. You can create colors on the go all the time very easily by just mixing a little tiny bit of these watercolors together. And you can change the depth of a color by adding more or less water and layering. And I love when I get a little bit of variation in the color or granulation. I love granulation. Not every watercolor person likes granulation, but I do. We're going to use, I don't actually know what that plant is, but we're going to pretend it's a flower and add some colors to it. We've got pinks and purples that I'm adding. And then we have this, this leaf. I think this could be a pothos. I think that's how you say it, pothos leaf. It could be, oh, there's all kinds, but I chose to make these leaves, maybe not on this version, but on some of the versions. Oh, yep, it is. I add that purpley mid veining look. I love these two-toned leaves. They're really pretty, and I just liked that variation. So I used a very limey green for the base of the green color of that, and then added the purple in the center. We have more leaves here, lots and lots of leaves. This is going to be predominantly a green piece with just as many different green colors as you can find. I really enjoy watercoloring. I sat down and watercolored and alcohol marker colored all of these different pieces, and I could have kept going because it was so fun to pick different colors and add shading and just relax. I sat down in front of my computer with I don't remember what I was watching. It was probably something I hadn't watched before because I wanted to use my time well. So why not watch something you hadn't watched yet? I can't remember what I watched though. I did at one point, I might have been watching Planet of the Apes, which, yes, I am a sci-fi nerd. I like a lot of sci-fi. Are there a lot of other sci-fi watchers in our group? What's your favorite things to watch? Are you rom-com? If you are, and you like a little adventure, I really recommend the Argyle movie. It's so freaking hilarious. I loved it. In fact, I didn't want to go to the theater by myself just because sometimes I don't want to leave the house. I mean, I leave the house. I do. I go shopping. I go to work. I go see family and stuff. But sometimes I just don't want to leave the house. So I bought Argyle on Amazon Prime and watched that. And it was so funny. There is a lot of action scene going on. There are a lot of action scenes in that movie. So it might be fun to watch in a theater, but it was just as fun to watch on my computer. The plot of that movie is that she is a spy thriller writer, and it spins off of that, where real life is imitating her writing. So awesome. I bet you didn't know you were going to get a movie review in this video. Just adding a little bit of clean, clear water here to make the background not quite so stark a white. And it just picks up a little bit of the color of the paint that's already been laid down and creates that nice shadow around your image. These did not reactivate a ton. Next, I'm going to use some alcohol markers to color the small bird here, the smaller grouping. And these are like seed pods, I think. I'm not even sure, but I decided they were going to be a mix of warm tones. So I started with a pink and topped it off with a little bit of red. And our little bird here is going to have a yellow belly, or a very yellow-green belly, and a head that is greens and blues, and a wing that is blues and teals. And I think that turned out just beautiful. I did this in a watercolor version also with the same color theme. Oh, so pretty. This was a really easy bird to color. You could do ink blending over these. You could leave this, you could emboss this in gold over an ink blended panel or over a piece of black cardstock or white cardstock. So many ways to make this work. And I just took a bunch of different greens and 2 tones in each family to color our different leaves, trying to have a different color green for each kind of leaf. And I've got greens, so I've got G's and I've got yellow or YGs here, so greens and yellow greens in combination. So I've got some bright emerald greens, some tealy blue greens, and some yellow greens or olive greens, all mixed in to create variety and depth in our different leaves here. And I do try to make sure that I use 2 colors on each leaf to show shadowing and depth. This one's more of a sagey green combo. And I did think about adding the purple to the centers of these pointy leaves, but I decided to keep those all green. I thought that would compete too much with the bird. Just one last bunch of leaves here, and this colors up much faster because it's a much smaller image. Can't forget his little beak, which I do a light orange color. Now, whenever I do alcohol marker coloring, I go back and re-stamp the image, but you have to remember to leave your stamp in your stamp positioner so it doesn't move, so it's really easy to re-stamp. Now, when I re-stamped it, because I used Hero Arts Intense Black ink because it's alcohol friendly. When I go back to restamp it, I use VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink because it's a pigment ink, and then I add some clear embossing powder and emboss over that, and it's just stunning. You wouldn't have to do that. You could restamp with the same black ink, but that's what I like to do. Here I've shown die cutting out that border around our flamingo piece, and there is a little cockatiel in there. I don't know if you noticed it when I was doing all my yapping. And this time we're going to do some ink blending with Twisted Citron, Mowed Lawn, and why am I having such a brain block on that? Let me pause this a second. Okay. Rustic Wilderness. I kept trying to think it was Forest Wilderness, and I knew that was wrong. All right, now that we've ink blended that, we're going to use the Scattered Tropics 3D embossing folder on this 3x6 inch piece of cardstock that we've ink blended to death. Yes, anyway. Then we're going to use the Pearl Luster gilding polish and to add a little highlight here. Now, I contemplated using a green gilding polish, but I thought it would compete too much with our alcohol ink colored not background, it's foreground, sure. Now that I've got that ink blended and foil or gilded, we're going to add some extra cardstock behind this and add it to a 6.5 by 3.5 inch mini slimline card. And I'm getting pretty fast and loose with my sizes of mini slimline cards. They're anywhere from 3 by 6 inches to 3.5 by 6.5 inches. I've done 3.25 by 6.5 inch, all different variations. Now you can make your own envelopes to make these work. Just know that it's hard to find commercial envelopes for all of those individual sizes. You might just have to settle for one that is close to the size but a little bigger than your card. I've taken all of the main sentiments, the one or two word sentiments from the Let's Get Together clear stamp and die set, and I have stamped them on this piece of scrap of white cardstock. This is actually a leftover from one of the flamingo backgrounds. You can kind of see the outline there. And I did use the alcohol ink blended foreground of the flamingo this time with a very pretty bird of paradise with all of the different colors there. It's almost a full rainbow. And I die cut those with their coordinating dies. We're going to use the I Am Tickled Pink for the front of the card. So I layered that up with a couple extra layers of cardstock. We'll add that to the front of our card. I'm just trying to figure out where I like the placement the best. And if I'd made this a smaller card, I might have tucked it closer to the flamingo's beak, but this works. And on the inside of the card, we're going to take that smaller grouping of the small tropical bird and floral element or foliage element. And I'm not going to put it all the way to the edge. I'm going to leave a thin border along the edge there. And we'll add the thanks sentiment here on the bottom of the card. And that is that card. What is that? Card number 5 or 6? Now we're on to card number 7. We're going to do a cute little shaped card here. I've already got my assembled pineapple because remember I said I made 6 of those. I'm going to take that base die and that scrap of cardstock from our previous shaped card. It fit this pineapple just about right with a little extra cardstock left over. And there's our shaped card base. We're going to just sand off the edges there so no paper crumbs are visible and flatten out that edge a little bit. I am using the scrapbook.com cutting mats. Those it basically is like your cutting mat on your table, but you're using it as a replacement for one of the cutting mats in your die cutting machine, and it doesn't leave any marks on the back of that card base, which I love. We're going to take a sentiment from this Tropical Sentiments, the extra from the Kit and Caboodle subscribers. We're going to add this sentiment that says, "You are sweet to the core," to the front of this, and I really just adhered that assembled pineapple to that shaped card base, and that is that card. Perfect little gift enclosure. Next, we're going to do some ink blending. I have Mermaid Lagoon, Salty Ocean, and Blueprint Sketch here, and I'm starting with the lightest, the Mermaid Lagoon. And I have a half sheet of cardstock here. So that's 5.5 by 8.5 inches. So I won't need all of this. I covered more of the card or the cardstock with the Mermaid Lagoon and then did Salty Ocean, and now we're working on Blueprint Sketch. And I've had the same sponge daubers on the sponge pads on these ink blending things for a long time. And I think this one is finally pulling loose from the Velcro backing, so I'm going to have to replace that. But we made it work for one more card. Next, we're going to take some Wild Honey, Ripe Persimmon, and Festive Berries. This is Festive Berries. And we're going to ink blend another piece of cardstock. Now, this is another half sheet of cardstock, but I'm not going to need that much of it. So I'm only going about halfway up this cardstock, maybe a little more than halfway. I started with the Wild Honey, and then the Ripe Persimmon, and then with the Festive Berries at the end here. Getting a nice smooth blend by going back over the colors or the transition areas with one or both of the ink colors. I'm going to take my pearlized water. Now this is just water with some perfect pearls in perfect pearl color mixed together. Just make sure you shake that good. We're going to use the 5x7 matting layers. This is going to be like my precision layering dies. I use them all the time. I'm going to use those all the time. Lattice work embossing folder of the month to that cut down piece, and this is actually like just under 6 3/4 by 4 3/4. We're going to use this blue to purple gilding polish. This is lavender blue, and I believe there is a wisteria blue in the Spellbinders shop, which does this. I think it starts purple and goes to blue. Very similar gilding polishes, and I don't know if you can get the lavender blue anymore, but this stuff lasts forever. So if you're looking for a versatile product that doesn't dry out and goes on very easily and has its own applicator, these gilding polishes are just the bomb. We're going to use the Tropical Spray stencil of the month. We're going to use this with ink and with some solar paste. So I'm using my Altenew sticky mat here again. I've got the paper stuck down, and I'm going to use some tape to secure the top edge, and we're going to go over the red, orange, and yellow areas again in the same pattern. You could change it up if you want, but I decided to keep it tone on tone. This will create just a darker image of the stenciling over the ink blended areas. This is a really easy stencil to work with. There are no delicate parts that tend to get caught on your sponge. I'm going to line this up again using the sticky mat to adhere 3 of the edges and my masking tape to secure that last edge and mask off some of the area of the cardstock so it doesn't get ink, or in this case, golden hour solar paste. Have I mentioned I love this stuff? It's amazing. Just going to give that a quick stir and apply this with a moderate hand, not a super heavy, but not a super light hand. I don't want any of the cardstock showing through. And this is a little bit translucent when it's all said and done. Just going to add this layer right over our stencil. And then after I'm done, I actually took a piece of paper towel and cleaned up the edges of that jar before I put the lid on. And I'm going to take the stencil, my palette knife, and that sticky mat to the sink and clean all of those. Next, we're going to use, after that's dried, we're setting that aside to dry, we're going to do the inside of the card. I've taken this Blooming Heart die. This is from a large die of the month from a year or 2 ago, and it's still, the last time I checked, is still in the Spellbinders shop. It's a beautiful set, and I use this heart a ton. It works great on 5x7 cards. I've die cut it from some copy paper here, and I taped it down to the inside of the card, and I'm ink blending in that same pattern with the Festive Berries, Ripe Persimmon, and Wild Honey. And I'm just initially using the ink that is on the sponge daubers without re-inking anything. Once I have that base layer down, I'm going to tape down our stencils using a little masking tape just to secure 2 of the edges right over that stencil. So it's not going to get ink anywhere I don't want it. And we'll repeat those colors again. festive berries over the festive berry area. And I do have to bring the ink pads out this time because there isn't enough ink left on the sponges to get a nice coloring here. So we've got festive berries at the top, ripe persimmon, and then wild honey. And then we'll unmask all of these areas and see the magic. Now, when you're taking masking tape off, it's best to go at an angle, especially for a new masking tape. And look at that, a stunning heart on the inside of your card. Now that this is dry, just look at that shimmer. Oh my gosh. I die cut this, and when I ran it through, I did put a piece of copy paper over the top of the cardstock and all of that bit, so none of the paste might be tempted to stick to the plates. I have taken a 5x7 piece of black cardstock and adhered that to the card front, just because I liked the black peeking out from behind our ink blended panel better than I liked the white. And it is a very thin, it's like a 1/16 inch border all the way around. Very pretty. So we'll adhere our lattice work, ink blended, embossed, and gilding polished panel. Just trying to be pretty careful on placing that. With those thin margins, you have less wiggle room and less foolery for your eye. I've added some extra cardstock behind our heart, and I'm just kind of holding those flamingos in place because I want to get that placement the right height for our flamingos. I've added some extra cardstock behind just the bodies of our flamingos, and I'm adding glue to the legs, the extra cardstock, the necks, and the heads. And I've got them intertwined. They're not glued together, they're just intertwined. And I'm trying to get these placed exactly the way I want them before I really let that adhere. I like how they are just kind of snuggling. It's like they're giving each other neck hugs. It's just so sweet. Then I'm taking one of the large white blooms from the large die of the month, and I'm tucking that in under the heart and kind of underneath one of the flamingos. I was looking for that extra pop of white and a little bit of grounding for that. Well, not grounding, a little more balance, a little more interest to the card front. We're also going to use I'm just showing you where I got all those pieces. The flamingos and that large heart are from the large die of the month. And the tropical bloom glimmer of the month is where we're going to get our sentiment. I foiled it in some polished brass on glossy black cardstock. I did a bunch of foiling as part of my prep work also with sentiments. I did the tropical sentiments and the Glimmer hot foil sentiments. I did a bunch of each of those so that when I was ready to add the sentiments, I could just pick them out and add them to the card. I added an extra layer of cardstock behind there, and this is another of the sequins from the 2023 advent calendar, crafty advent calendar from Spellbinders. There were these the bright pink and the bright purpley blue. I love them. They go perfectly with this ink blended background. And this card needed just a little more pizzazz. So I added a scattering of these sequins across the card. And that finishes that card. On to card number 9. Oh my gosh. We're going to use the lattice work embossing folder again, and this is another 3x6 inch piece of cardstock that I have just embossed, and I added some extra cardstock to the back of that. And then we have a 3 1/4 by 6 1/4 inch piece mini slimline card, and we're going to use the large blooms and some foliage from the large die of the month, the Grand Tropical Flamingo. And I've lined them up with my press and seal piece that I've used a million times to get my placement, and will adhere that to the front of the card. And that makes for a really quick and easy card. Now, I just want to mention here that subscribers to the Spellbinders clubs have early access to the next month's releases. And the small die cut machine that I was talking about, that has the 3 1/2 inch opening, which would fit just about every die out there except for your large layering dies. It would fit if you didn't have any of the large layering dies, that is the only thing you would need. Well, I mean, it doesn't do the big embossing folders, but it would do all of these awesome little smaller dies, all of them. I'm so excited. Well, anyway, if you are a club member, you can get to the pre-order on the 6th. Otherwise, it's the 10th for everyone else. You also get early access to all of the new releases for Spellbinders. So whatever's coming out that month, you would be able to get on the 6th instead of waiting for everyone else. This way you can make sure if it's going to be a hot item and sells out, like the peony background from Yana's release 2 months ago, that's still not back in stock. Oh, you would have your first dibs. Oh my gosh. There is completed card number 9. I used those glimmered sentiments again. And card number 10, we're using some ink blending to coordinate with the stripes on our toucan. We've got spun sugar, dried marigold, shabby shutters, and tumbled glass. And I just have an A2 size piece of cardstock that I'm ink blending here with these distress oxides. And I often use an acrylic block to help hold those down so I don't get fingerprints and so I don't accidentally wrinkle my paper. You know, you're ink blending along and it just pulls the paper up and causes a big wrinkle. I hate that. Next, I cut these down to layer on a 4-bar size card, and I use the Scattered Tropics to emboss my ink blended panel. And as you can see, I die cut a piece of Desert Storm cardstock. This is, so a 4-bar card is roughly 3.5 by 5 inches. So this is probably 3 1/4 by 4 3/4 for that Desert Storm panel, which I have some extra cardstock on. And then I trimmed off about 3/4 of an inch off one side because I'm going to do some fun things here. I added a little extra cardstock behind that ink blended and embossed panel, and I did add some pearl luster gilding polish on it. And you will notice that I added extra cardstock just on the right 3/4 of that panel because we're going to tuck all of these leaves in under. So they're overlapping with that Desert Storm cardstock and creating this fun little shaped border. And I'm just going to add glue to each of these pieces and tuck them back in. I did pre-lay them out because I wanted to get a good combination of colors and textures and shapes. And I'm just going through and adding those. I did tear one of those apart a little bit, I think, so it would fit better. Next, we're going to add our cute little toucan, who I've added a little extra cardstock behind. And I've kind of centered him here. He's kind of an awkward shaped fellow, but he's adorable. We're also going to use a sentiment from Tropical Sentiments. This one is foiled in polished brass on white and die cut and layered with a couple extra layers of cardstock here. If you like a little extra dimension on there, especially over a nice 3D embossed area, adding extra layers makes a big difference. And I'm trying to figure out where I exactly want that sentiment. I do end up centering it on the embossed portion of the card front. That just seemed like the best placement, and I really did fiddle with that for a long time, didn't I? And that's the front of our card, and I didn't add any sequins. Can you believe it? I did grab a couple of leaves, some foliage, and a flower, and we're going to add those to the inside of the card. There are no sequins on this card. Shocking, right? So I take our palm leaf, and I'm going to tuck that into the inside corner, and our monstera leaf, and add that. And I'm not going to worry about where that stem is because this last flower is going to cover up any other details. I really enjoyed this month, and I'm going to have so many extra pieces that I can add to other cards in the future. Oh my gosh. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, now is a great time to do that. Let me know which of these techniques was your favorite and what you would like to see me do more of. I know this is a really long video, and if you have to watch it in batches, I completely understand. If you're interested in any of the products that I used today, check that description box below for the full list link and for the more new products in the full description. Until next time, here are a couple more videos you might enjoy. Bye-bye.